My name is Deborah Iskandar. So, welcome to Isa Art and Design. Isa Art and Design is a gallery and an art consultancy based in Jakarta. As part of this show, we've put together an exhibition of Indonesian Diaspora artists entitled Buah Tangan. Buah Tangan in Indonesian means souvenir. It also means, a little description, is fruit of the hand. So, with our Indonesian Diaspora show, we're looking at Indonesian heritage artists who were born and raised abroad, but of Indonesian heritage and cultural background. With this exhibition, we're looking at their artworks and how they have been able to incorporate their Indonesian identity into the artworks. So you can see the feelings of displacement that they have, being raised in a foreign country but still trying to connect to their Indonesian roots, and also the place of coming home to Indonesia. Having been born and raised abroad, they've all been visiting back to Indonesia to have that feeling or spirit of coming home. The exhibition is also providing a platform for alternative narratives between a homage and a reminder of the dynamicism of Indonesian art history. In between the various art fairs and biennales and artists of different regions, and in fact even at the Venice Biennale in 2017, the art world has come in tune with the idea of diaspora issues. It's also been looking at the rise of artists, the multicultural background, and how it becomes almost a way of commodifying of culture because of the way that we travel, we live, we work. It's becoming very sophisticated, but at the same time bringing together different ideas and cultures. If you look at the artists that we've selected, we have 5 artists: Devore, Ines Katamso, Sinta Tantra, Eva Lawrence, and Hadassah Emmerich. With these 5 artists, they come from very different backgrounds. If you look at Devore, for example, his grandparents were born and raised in Samarang and were in the sugar business. During the end of the colonial period in the Indonesian independence, they immigrated to America when their sugar businesses were nationalized. But Adam had never visited Indonesia till he was 18 years old and came back as a surfer to reconnect with his Indonesian roots. The same is true with Ines Katamso, who was of French-Indonesian nationality. She was born here, moved to Europe, and again came back to Indonesia in her early 20s to look at her Indonesian identity and heritage. For the other artists, we've had the same experience. They have always had a connection to their homeland. Like, for example, with Sinta Tantra. She was born abroad, but came back to Indonesia, to Bali, every year to visit family, to visit relatives. The same with Eva Lawrence. Ida is of Australian heritage, born in Australia, but kept coming back to her father's village. If we look at the artworks one by one, let's look at Ines Katamso. With Ines, she's looking back to identity and the origin of life. Her boyfriend gave her a microscope for Christmas, and she was very fascinated by cells, the way that cells can spread and replicate and go on to form the human being and human objects and atoms. So in her painting, she's trying to replicate the movement of the cells. She's actually used 2 canvases, of which she drizzled the gouache on it and let it spread. And then after it spread, like a cell would naturally divide and spread, and then used a brush to create the different meanings. She's also about layering. The second canvas she's cut in reference to like Lucian Fontano slash paintings and weaved it back into the current canvas. So it's this process of weaving, of transforming the canvas, of watching the way the cells can divide and replicate that has created this new body of work. Then the next artist we're going to visit is Hadassah Emmerich. Hedessa is of Indonesian Dutch background, but her grandfather was actually German. He worked for the Dutch Railroad in Bandung. So again, Hedessa's father was born in Indonesia, but they immigrated to Holland at the end of the war, at the beginning of the Indonesian independence. Hedessa grew up in Holland. She was part of a troupe that would perform at some of the fairs, like Indonesia. It was like a hula. So she was looking back at some of the presentations of dance and the bodies merging and movement. If you look at the works, they're very voyeuristic, right? And in Hedessa's work, she uses monoprints and creates patterns and abstractions. So she will take like a tile and put the paint over it and just do layers and layers to create this very fluid mirage of colors. Then if we get to the works of Eva Lawrence, as I mentioned, Eva was from Australian heritage, and she would visit back to Indonesia from the time she was a young girl. Her father was from a village called Sarangan outside in central Java. One of her early bodies of work was Stories My Father Told Me. In Australia, she never felt like she was purely Australian because she was of Eurasian heritage. But yet, when she came to Indonesia to visit her family, she realized maybe she's not very Indonesian either. So it's always this search of identity between her Western upbringing and her Eastern roots. And so with Ida, if you look at this works that we have, it's Ole Ole Fails. And Ole Ole Fails was talking about when she came back to Indonesia, she would always want to bring gifts for her grandmother and her parents. And sometimes she'd bring like beautiful pieces of fabric and cloth, not realizing her grandmother was actually a batik maker. It could actually make textiles and gifts much more beautiful than the gifts that she was bringing. And then the other painting that we have is called Leaving is a Process. And if you look at it, you can see she's written the stories in raffia. And in Indonesia, raffia, or the talian, is very common in Indonesia. You use it to hang the bananas, at the market, or you always tying up boxes of food. You always, if you come to the airport in Jakarta, you always see these boxes of food. Indonesians love to give food as presents. So in this Leaving as a Process, she was talking about the gifts that she would actually receive from her family. In one, it would be like the rempeyek, the pit bananas, the pisang, and then, the box of the ducks and the salted egg, because that was always the connection between her and her family. They were always giving gifts to her, as the idea of, when you say goodbye to someone dear, you always want to give them something to remember you by. If we look at Sinta Tantra is an artist of Balinese descent, but born and raised in London. She attended the Slade College of Art in London, and she describes herself as a painter on an architectural scale. So if you look at her artworks, especially the ones in this current show, there is very much a yin and a yang, a balance. If you look at it, you can always see that you're walking through the painting. Some of these were based on the Charlie Chaplin movie, The Modern Times. Towards the end of his life, Charlie Chaplin actually visited Bali, and he was struck between the dichotomy of, the movies were going from silent movies to talking movies, how to reconcile that with his practice. So if you look at the Modern Times, it's about what's rational and what's irrational. There's two sides of the same coin, or the alternative realities. Also, if you look at Sinta's paintings, she's known as a colorist. She's got these really pop colors. That's the colors that you would see if you were looking at Western art, say from the early pop artists like Andy Warhol or Frank Stella. Mandela. But at the same time, it reflects back to her Indonesian roots, the colors of Bali, the tropics. There's so much colors, the birds of paradise. One of the artworks is entitled Bird of Paradise. And it's really the colors and the energy that you feel when you're in Bali. So it's the merging of the two worlds, between the Western world of balance and symmetry and architecture and Bauhaus, together with the Asian, the colors, the riots, the sense of identity and belonging between the two. Lastly, in the exhibition, we have Adam Devore. If you look at his paintings, it's from an inside-out perspective. It's like he's looking down on the scene. It's a bit of surrealistic, So if you see the artwork Volcano Viewpoint by Adam Devore, it's a reflection of the Moy Indies. You can see the Mount Merapi, the Borobudur, the Prabanan, but then in the forefront, it's like you're looking down over the wall into what's going on behind the wall. In Joji, you had the Kraton, which was always a very special place with the lines in the kingdoms. But in this view, you see the viewers standing up on the bed check to look down over the wall. But actually, when you look down, it's a soccer game. So you can see how he's looking back the diverse communities that you have in Indonesia. If you look at this exhibition, we've actually pulled together artists from very diverse backgrounds, from Australia, from America, from Holland, from France. But yet what ties them together is their Indonesian identity and their Indonesian heritage, and how they can communicate that feeling of their homeland and their identity into their artworks.